The moment a law prohibits stockpiling essentials, the risk to households and local systems is immediate, even if invisible. On the surface, store shelves remain stocked, supply chains hum along, and distribution centers continue their regular cycles. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, the calculus of scarcity begins to shift. Emergency planners and logistics analysts recognize the subtle but measurable vulnerability. Modern supply chains operate with minimal buffer, optimized for efficiency rather than resilience. A restriction on personal stockpiling does not merely limit consumer behavior. It compresses the time between demand and replenishment, reducing the system's capacity to absorb shocks. Even a temporary disruption, such as transportation delays, sudden spikes in energy prices, or extreme weather events, can cascade more rapidly into localized shortages than most people anticipate. The danger is not immediate starvation. It is the amplification of minor interruptions into behavioral crises, where stress-driven demand overwhelms delivery capacity. Understanding this risk requires examining the architecture of modern distribution. Urban grocery stores typically maintain 3 to 5 days of inventory on hand. Warehouses do not store surplus. They are throughput nodes designed to move goods continuously, relying on precise timing, synchronized transport, and temperature-controlled storage for perishable items. If individuals are prohibited from stockpiling, the system is deprived of a distributed buffer of human-maintained reserves. Small delays in trucking routes, port throughput, or refrigeration chains that once would have been mitigated by household stores now become immediate pressure points. The common misunderstanding is that shortages are caused primarily by panic buying or consumer misbehavior. In reality, the trigger lies in structural fragility. The efficiency-driven network, designed to operate at near maximum capacity under normal conditions, has no slack to absorb variations. A single delayed delivery can subtract hundreds of tons of consumables from multiple stores simultaneously, triggering a domino effect that spreads rapidly across a region. The hidden science underpinning this vulnerability is rooted in network theory and flow dynamics. Supply chains function as complex, interdependent networks, with nodes representing storage and processing centers and edges representing transport links. When a system operates near peak efficiency, it is inherently nonlinear. Small inputs can generate disproportionately large outputs. In practical terms, a 10% reduction in delivery capacity in one node can translate into a 50% reduction in shelf availability downstream. This phenomenon, known in industrial logistics as the bullwhip effect, demonstrates how minor variations in local consumption propagate upward, amplifying upstream fluctuations. Laws that limit personal reserves remove one mitigating factor in this amplification, effectively increasing the sensitivity of the network to everyday variability. Evidence of these dynamics is abundant in historical disruptions. Short-term crises, whether caused by transportation strikes, energy supply constraints, or extreme weather events, consistently reveal that urban areas with high population-to-store ratios experience visible shortages within 24 to 72 hours. Data from emergency management agencies confirms that these shortages are not the result of irrational consumer behavior alone. They are predictable outcomes of throughput limitations. During these periods, items with strict storage requirements, milk, eggs, frozen foods, often vanish first, not because production has halted, but because the chain of movement cannot maintain equilibrium under sudden demand spikes. Observational studies in multiple cities have shown that even a single day of misaligned deliveries can cascade into multi-store gaps, forcing rapid adjustments in consumer behavior and increasing the intensity of demand at remaining supply points. The survival implications extend beyond mere access to food. When essential commodities are unavailable, even briefly, human behavior escalates. Households begin visiting multiple locations, increasing travel, congestion, and exposure to risk. Delivery networks struggle to rebalance because transportation assets are already scheduled at capacity, and warehouse throughput cannot scale instantaneously. The absence of personal stockpiles accelerates this stress. There are no distributed caches to buffer minor disruptions, meaning that the system reaches critical stress thresholds faster and with greater intensity. These localized disruptions then propagate geographically, transforming isolated shortages into regional patterns. Escalation occurs naturally, not through mismanagement, but through the physics of constrained flow and reactive behavior. Transitioning from analysis to broader perspective, it becomes clear that the risk landscape is shaped by structural dependency. Regions with limited local production, high import reliance, and concentrated population centers are most exposed. Urban centers with large metropolitan populations, long transport corridors, and minimal buffer in local warehouses face the fastest depletion cycles. A delayed truck at a regional hub subtracts inventory from dozens of stores simultaneously, a dynamic invisible until shortages manifest on the shelves. Meanwhile, areas with distributed production and shorter supply chains retain partial resilience. The hidden principle is time compression. Modern supply chains have eliminated the buffer periods of past decades in pursuit of efficiency. Where a delay once allowed a week for corrective action, now the window is often less than 48 hours, leaving little room for intervention before shortages become public and demand feedback loops intensify. As the system accelerates toward instability, the interplay between human perception and logistical reality becomes critical. Individuals interpret the absence of familiar products as an immediate threat, triggering anticipatory behavior that intensifies demand. When stockpiling is restricted, even minor disruptions create perceptual scarcity. The shelves are emptying faster than replenishment occurs, and households cannot rely on personal reserves to smooth the timing mismatch. This phenomenon is not speculative. Studies in behavioral economics and supply chain management show that visible shortages, even temporary, amplify demand signals, creating a feedback loop that further stresses the system. When hundreds or thousands of households respond simultaneously, delivery schedules optimized for standard demand are insufficient, and minor gaps escalate into region-wide scarcity. The danger is systemic, not localized. What begins as a small, routine interruption becomes a rapid desynchronization between supply and demand. The analysis of this effect underscores the importance of redundancy and distributed storage. Modern supply chains have largely minimized redundancy to reduce costs and increase turnover efficiency. Warehouses operate close to full capacity, transport schedules are tightly coordinated, and perishable goods move along strict temperature-controlled corridors. Removing household stockpiles through legislation eliminates one layer of redundancy that previously acted as a buffer. Without it, every bottleneck, whether a delayed truck, port congestion, or fuel disruption, translates immediately into visible scarcity. Misunderstandings often arise because consumers and policymakers equate availability with production. In truth, production remains largely unaffected. The system fails not due to lack of goods, but due to the inability to maintain continuous movement to end users. The hidden science behind this is dynamic network stress. Supply networks are nonlinear systems in which small interruptions propagate disproportionately, amplified by human reaction. Historical evidence reinforces this vulnerability. In multiple case studies across the last decade, short-term supply disruptions consistently produced empty shelves within 24 to 72 hours in high-density urban areas. For example, transportation strikes in major metropolitan corridors resulted in perishable shortages, not because production stopped, but because the continuous throughput was interrupted. Similarly, power outages affecting refrigeration chains forced the disposal of otherwise usable products, creating sudden inventory gaps. These events reveal the structural fragility inherent in efficiency-optimized networks. High throughput with low slack means that any interruption, when combined with natural human responsiveness, produces a cascading sequence of shortages. Regions with concentrated consumption and limited warehouse capacity, essentially urban centers dependent on continuous inbound logistics, are the most exposed. The survival implications of such disruptions are immediate and practical. Access to critical daily needs, food, water, sanitation products, and basic medical supplies, is compromised. Even a temporary shortage triggers adaptive behaviors. Households substitute less perishable items, visit multiple stores, and sometimes migrate across districts in search of stock. The system, already optimized for routine demand, cannot scale in real time to meet these amplified consumption patterns. Escalation occurs not because the system is inherently flawed, but because efficiency-driven design leaves minimal slack. With stockpiling prohibited, the buffer that previously allowed minor delays to be absorbed no longer exists. Small disturbances, previously manageable, now propagate into wider systemic stress. As these dynamics unfold, structural dependencies emerge as critical determinants of vulnerability. Areas with minimal local production, heavy reliance on imported goods, and dense populations experience depletion faster than less centralized regions. A single missed delivery cycle in a highly dependent network can ripple across millions of consumers within hours. Meanwhile, regions with distributed production or multiple sourcing routes demonstrate partial resilience, absorbing minor delays without visible shortages. The hidden science here is the principle of network connectivity. Every additional node, distribution hub, transportation link, or warehouse represents a potential point of failure. When redundancy is absent, disruptions propagate faster and with greater intensity. Time compression exacerbates this effect. Modern supply chains eliminate the multi-day buffers of previous decades, so delays that once required a week to impact consumers now produce effects in less than 48 hours. Behavioral synchronization further amplifies vulnerability. In today's interconnected world, reports of empty shelves spread instantly through digital channels, prompting preemptive demand elsewhere. Consumers act not only on local conditions but also on observed scarcity in distant regions, effectively pulling future consumption into the present. Without personal stockpiles to moderate this process, households increase immediate consumption, triggering spikes that outpace the network's capacity to respond. The system is forced to meet both current and anticipatory demand, which it is not engineered to handle. This creates a nonlinear escalation. Supply networks are responsive, not predictive, and their near-maximum operating conditions leave no room to absorb sudden, correlated spikes. Empirical evidence confirms that this combination of structural dependency, time compression, and behavioral synchronization produces predictable patterns of shortage. Coastal cities reliant on port imports experience immediate vulnerability if port throughput is delayed. Inland urban centers dependent on long-haul trucking see similar effects if fuel distribution is inconsistent. In both cases, the absence of household stockpiles intensifies the impact. Previously, personal reserves could have temporarily mitigated local gaps, slowing the spread of shortages. Without them, the margin for error shrinks dramatically, and visible scarcity occurs faster, producing a feedback loop of perception-driven demand escalation. The survival implications extend beyond food security. Grocery stores serve as distribution points for essential daily necessities, not just perishable items. When these products become unavailable, even for a short period, secondary effects occur. Households overpurchase alternatives, substitute items, or crowd multiple locations, further distorting demand signals. The system, already operating near peak efficiency, cannot rebalance immediately, and shortages propagate to additional categories of essential supplies. This is not speculative. It is a consequence of throughput design and the absence of mitigating redundancies such as personal stockpiles. Escalation becomes unavoidable when multiple stressors overlap: transportation delays, refrigeration disruptions, labor shortages, and consumer reaction. Ultimately, the restriction of stockpiling transforms minor disruptions into systemic stress events. What begins as a routine delay evolves into a chain reaction of shortages, behavioral amplification, and geographic propagation. The principle is clear. Efficiency-optimized supply networks without distributed buffers are fragile, and prohibitions on household reserves remove one of the few remaining stabilizing mechanisms. The first visible shortages appear quickly, and the system enters a feedback loop in which perception drives behavior, behavior drives demand, and demand overwhelms supply. Recovery is no longer immediate. Restoring equilibrium requires coordination, time, and stable conditions that are scarce during rapid onset disruptions. Transitioning to the broader perspective, the risk is not evenly distributed. Highly dependent, densely populated regions experience the earliest and most severe depletion. Distributed agricultural areas, diversified transport networks, and shorter supply chains provide partial resilience. Yet the overall lesson is consistent. Prohibit